and welcome to that's interesting. Hello and welcome to Blind Eye Live. I'm your host, Hunter King, Blind Eye himself, owner proprietor of Blind Eye Media. And I hope you're having a good Wednesday. I was expecting to hear my voice in my ears, and it didn't, which makes me think I need to add something to my mixer. I'm so confused. So very confused. I've been working on fixing issues this entire time, and it's just since last night even, and I really don't understand. I don't understand. Let's go back to that maybe. Actually, real quick. Sorry, I'm having to troubleshoot again. So, while I troubleshoot, I'll get into the rundown for today's show. We've got our AFC West division preview. The University of Texas has named their starter. There we go. Cool. This is going to take some getting used to. Hearing yourself in your monitor is kind of interesting when you haven't done it. Why is that not? There we go. Okay. So what happens when you're a... See, as I subscribed to one of my good buddies, Kendall, last night, I am a caveman in the music world. I beat on sheets of metal and polymer to make noises. I use wooden sticks to beat on them, or to be more precise. Not very sophisticated. I also make really loud noises with my mouth. You know, that's what I do. I am not a sound engineer. So, this is an adventure. If I ever started making money, I could pay for a producer to help with that. But I think I fixed an audio issue that he helped me discover yesterday. Because I've never used headphones to listen to my show before. So I didn't realize that it was in mono coming out. Hopefully that is fixed now. Because I did something that you would think would make it go to mono, but instead I'm hearing it in stereo. I was having the same issue running out of my monitor, or running my headphones to my monitor last night. I was only getting it in the left ear, lightly out of the right, but it was pretty much entirely out of the left ear. Now I've got it even. Hopefully that's fixed. So, housekeeping done. Like I said, Texas has named a starting quarterback. LSU also has not named it, but the day one starter right now seems extremely clear from all accounts. Now, that does not mean, and we'll get into it, doesn't mean he'll make it through the whole season. So we'll talk about that here in a minute. I wanted to hit some quick news headlines. Also, my volume levels are up a little bit. I was having to kind of turn my audio up a little too much, I felt like, when I was playing the show back. So tell me if you like the upped audio levels in the comments, or pop in the live show. So we got some sad news today, a couple pieces. Shaquem Griffin, former UCF and Seattle Seahawks linebacker, has decided to retire from the NFL. He's going with Plan A. Shaquem Griffin is famous for being one of the stars of UCF's undefeated team from, 2017 now? Who had one hand because of a birth defect. He literally played football with one hand and was a heck of an edge rusher famously ran a 9.35 or 9.36 40. I know he ran the 4.3s at the combine, and with an adapter, was able to bench, I think, like 9 times on the bench press, which is ridiculous considering if you've looked at his left hand and forearm because of it. His forearm's not exactly the strongest because, well, you know. But he got like 9 or 10 reps on the bench. It was ridiculous. One of the coolest combine scenes I've ever seen. Because, like, yeah, the number for the 40 was height. The bench press was actually more impressive. In other sad news, also kind of related to AFC West, Lynn Dawson, quarterback of the Chiefs' first Super Bowl team and first Super Bowl winner, he passed away. So he was the quarterback for the Chiefs in Super Bowl I against the Packers, which they lost, and he was the winning quarterback in Super Bowl IV, which they drubbed the Minnesota Vikings. So those little bits of news. We also have and Tiger Woods and Rory McIlroy have started up some primetime virtual golf league. So that's something, I guess. And Chet Holmgren injured himself in a Pro-Am game. So he's having to get his foot tested. Actually, let's pull that article up for y'all.
If you like The Bachelorette, you'll love our new movie, Bros.
It is exactly like The Bachelorette, except there are no bachelorettes, and all the men are gay.
Other than that, you'd never know the difference.
Bros, rated R.
What just happened? Okay, let's see. Maybe that was the audio output device. Yeah, I usually have that muted. Let's see. Yeah, that was I love autoplay ads, man, on a
Theater September.
Article that I'm reading. Man, let me mute that. Okay, so I don't know. As you can see, I don't know what I'm doing. That's weird, though. Oh, that was probably coming out of my TV. And through... Let me mute that, maybe? No, let's not do that. Okay. I'm gonna phone a friend who knows more about this stuff eventually. Okay, so let's get into this article. Chet Holmgren. Oh, I forgot. I didn't pull that up for y'all because I got distracted. There we go. Oklahoma City. Between storm or like monsoons, thunderstorms, and work on the house. Everything's nuts. All right. Oklahoma City Thunder rookie Chet Holmgren is having to undergo a test on his right foot after suffering an injury at a Pro-Am Saturday in Seattle. I wonder if that was crossover. Team spokesperson told ESPN's Adrian Wojnarowski, well, you know, that was probably a dumb idea. Yep, he picked up an injury early in the crossover Pro-Am, which, while defending LeBron James on a fast break. Man, so LeBron's done Drew League, now he's doing crossover with Jamal Crawford. Because crossover is Jamal Crawford's Pro-Am that he does in his hometown of Seattle. Also, the home of Isaiah Thomas. The fun, smaller one. Not the stick up his backside former Piston. Holmgren was one of a number of NBA players participating in the Pro-Am, along with LeBron James, Jason Tatum, number 1 pick Paolo Banchero, DeJounte Murray, and Aaron Gordon. Oh, that's a pretty good group. The game was canceled in the second quarter because of the condition of the court. The unusually humid day in Seattle, combined with a full crowd, caused reported wet spots and condensation, which could have aided in Chet's injury. Chet, who is 7'1", 195 pounds. That is ridiculous, by the way, how freaking skinny he is. Like him, Alexej Pokusevski, those two guys are just ridiculously slight. He averaged 14 points and 8.4 rebounds in 5 games for the Thunder earlier this summer during the Vegas Summer League. And I think he should have gone number 1 overall. I'm glad he didn't. I wanted him on the Thunder, but he would have been my choice, number 1. All right. So with that, flip over here again. All right. So wrong way. I wish my mic stand wasn't quite so sensitive. Anyway, getting into college football news. So, LSU has a starting quarterback. It's Jalen Daniels. I've been rooting for Garrett Nussmeier to get that job. Nothing necessarily against Jalen Daniels. But Daniels has been... He's further along in his development. I mean, he's got starts under his belt. He's got way more snaps under his belt than Garrett Nussmeier. And right now, Daniels has been spinning the ball really well. His accuracy has been a little bit above expected. And that has turned into what seems like a pretty clear decision that he's the number 1 quarterback. I haven't seen them announce it officially yet, but I'm saying that's who's starting week 1. However, my contacts at LSU have come back, have pretty much said as much. One said that still doesn't mean he will be the starter the entire season. The other went a little further and said that Garrett Nussmeier will be the starting quarterback by the end of the season. Which, that's pretty strong, but my biases lead me to believe that. It's probably true. Man, it is pouring down rain again. I didn't realize when, I moved to Beaumont that I was moving to the Amazon rainforest. The bugs are almost as big, too. Okay. So that's LSU. I firmly expect Jaden Daniels to be announced starting quarterback any day now, if he has not already, for week 1. That doesn't even mean that Garrett Nussmeier might not get snaps week 1 either, but I expect Jaden Daniels to be the starter for the FSU game. Moving on from LSU, who I think LSU is going to be feisty this year. I think Late Kick probably got their record right, on their predicted record right at 7-5, which Pate's predictions are, whatever analytics model they have created there. I wish I had my hands on it. If you're betting this fall on college football, recommend tuning into Late Kick and paying attention to the Ramen Noodle Express. Good way to make money. But I would encourage you to, if you do bet on everything, not just pick one or two. Because this is sports. There is random variance. But the wider net you cast, the more dice you throw, the more good rolls you're going to get. Is the way I would look at it. Oh, that was loud. Moving to Texas. The Longhorns, and some of you tuning in this probably have already seen this news. Quinn Ewers has been announced the starter at the University of Texas. No shock to anyone. None at all. I wonder, am I echoing slightly? Yeah, I should be here. Okay. To the surprise of no one, Quinn Ewers has been named a starter. Now, that doesn't mean, like some people, well, yeah, it's because he's a big name and there's that NIL money and, oh my goodness. It is really coming down. Like, that's coming through my mic. Sorry, I keep getting distracted today. Quinn Ewers earned that starting job. He was named the starting quarterback because he gives them the best chance to win, not because they paid him NIL money or just because of his name. He has the big name because he's freaking great. If Hudson Card couldn't beat out Casey Thompson outright, he's not beating out Quinn Ewers. And that's not supposed to be a dig at Casey Thompson. Don't get that twisted. And Casey Thompson dealt with a pretty significant thumb injury last year, and that did affect him. But I would hazard to say that anyone who thinks Quinn Ewers didn't win this job and was handed this job, you don't have a leg to stand on. And I mean, and frankly, I frankly find it absurd. My goodness, it's raining even harder. Steve Sarkisian is trying to do things the right way. He wants to keep his job long term. He's not going to make some stupid political decision at quarterback or a financial decision at quarterback. He's going to make a winning on the field decision at quarterback. Don't you love every time you get an Amber Alert? Makes you die a little inside. Anyway, sorry. I think Texas is going to be interesting this year. They're going to be very volatile. I'm still not 100% sold on their defense. Their offense, with Isaiah Nair being out for the season, took a big hit. They do still have Xavier Worthy, and they have other guys. Ajay Hall was transferred in. They got Jaleel Billingsley. They did get some good news with the offensive tackle Banks, who they were expecting to start, who went down with an injury. It is nowhere near as severe as originally thought. We'll see if he's ready to go week 1, but he's not going to miss a whole lot of time, which is good for him, for the Longhorns, and for college football fans in general. The more good teams there are, the more healthy teams there are, the more good games there are to watch. That's what I'm in it for. Well, that and a Tennessee Volunteers National Championship run at some point before I die. We can only hope. Some other some other thoughts. USC is dealing with a ton of injuries, especially on the defensive side of the ball in camp. They don't have a lot of depth. I think all these people who have like USC ranked in like their top 11, 12, 15 teams, I think they're kind of kidding themselves. Because even with the offensive talent they have, they're still not as deep particularly like on the O-line, they have any injuries there, that's going to be a big deal. Now, that doesn't mean that USC might not win like 8 or 9 games, but they're not one of the 20 best teams in the country. Because I think they're going to lose to Oregon, Utah. I believe they also are playing Notre Dame. They're going to lose that game too. Everyone else on their schedule, I mean, like, they could lose to Stanford early in the season. I don't look at their schedule and see like this incredibly tough schedule, because all the teams they're going up against have some questions. I think Notre Dame's a little overrated, but Notre Dame's definitely better than USC this season. And I'm expecting Oregon to not miss too much of a beat from where they were under Mario Cristobal. And they upgraded at quarterback over the offseason. I don't care what anyone says. Is Bo Nix like an amazing college quarterback? Can he be a little volatile and inconsistent? Sure, but I think some of that was the product of the offenses and coaching staffs he was in. Like, Gus Malzahn does not have a track record of developing quarterbacks. In all truth. He gets guys and they pretty much just seem to stay who they are. Harsin got one season. He and his staff, we won't know whether he could have done more with Bo Nix. But Bo Nix is better than what they had last year in Anthony Brown, especially on the ceiling side of things. Anthony Brown was a mid-floor, low-ceiling quarterback. Just, not very impressed. Man, I wish I could afford soundproofing. Okay. But I think Oregon, and there's a bunch of buzz with Utah right now, and Pate and their analytics model are super high on them. He's got Utah in the playoff. I'm not convinced. I'm not convinced. I think they're extremely well coached, and I think they've got talent, but they lost some pretty important players this offseason, and I personally am not. I see a 10-win ceiling there. 10 wins isn't getting you in the playoff, in my opinion. Which, the thing is, like, I look at their schedule, and I can look at their schedule and even see them running the table. The issue for me is, in the past, they've arguably had teams good enough to do that and didn't. Like, to me, they were the best team in the conference last year, which they did win the conference. They still ended up 10-4 after losing to Ohio State. Ohio State, who was without their two highest drafted players on the team because they sat out. And I can't remember if Utah had a number of guys sit out or whatever, but if you're betting on Utah winning 11 or more games, you're believing that I think people are believing in a talent level that isn't there, or they're believing that they're going to be greater than some of their parts. That's what you have to bet on. Although they do have really good parts, and this is a really good Utah team. But, I'm sorry, really good doesn't belong in the college football playoff. But, if the Pac-12 is as bleh as I think it's going to be this year, they could easily run off 11-1, 12-0 season. So, but don't be surprised if Oregon ends up winning that division or winning that conference this year. Because I'd argue they probably should have won it last year. And I would blame Anthony Brown and their offensive coordinator. And that's my one worry with Miami, or would have been my one worry with Mario Cristobal going to Miami, except he got Josh Gaddis to be his offensive coordinator. And he's got a great young QB in Tyler Van Dyke. And right now, I'm picking Miami to win the ACC. I like their schedule, and I like the fact that they're on the opposite side of the conference from NC State and Clemson. And their side of the conference also has Duke and Georgia Tech. Like, I feel like they're in slightly easier side of the conference. I'm not as high on NC State as some people. Once again, I think they're going to be really good, but I don't think they're going to be great. And they lost some. Once again, another team. They're not Alabama or Clemson or LSU or, like, right now, currently Arkansas, in my opinion. Like, Arkansas just lost Treylon Burks. They just got Hazelwood from OU out of the transfer portal. Is he going to be 100% of Treylon Burks? That's hard to say. But he has the ability to, or at least get really close, and the rest of their receiver room is better. So as a whole, they can replace Treylon Burks and improve on production from last season. But NC State's not just replacing Ike Ekwonu. And I get that's one player, but I think he was an extremely important player for that offense. We'll see if their offensive line is able to play as well this season. But it's hard to think that a team like NC State's going to replace that guy immediately, or even bump up their talent level at multiple spots to make up for that in other ways. The team isn't one player, but they also lost Bam Knight, their top running back. I don't know. They beat Clemson last year. I don't know if that's going to happen 2 years in a row, because I think Clemson's going to be better at the quarterback position this year. Whether that's improvement from DJ or Cade Klubnik eventually taking that job. And that defensive line, that front seven's, despite the losses at linebacker, those guys are more replaceable. And Clemson's front seven is going to be really good this year. And I think they're going to be better on the offensive line. And they're hoping their receiver room is a little more dynamic this year. But that, we'll have to wait and see. Let's see, any other things I want to touch on? Oh, there's some pictures going around about, from, like, the SEC, like, rosters, like, they're taking pictures and everything, like, team pictures. And the University of Florida literally has a staff member to player ratio of 1-to-1, which is insane. Now, that is not coaches, because there is a limit to how many hands-on coaches every NCAA team can have, which I think is ridiculous. my kid's going to your school, I want him to have as many good coaches as absolutely possible. Like, we should be able to have a cornerbacks coach, a safeties coach, an outside, inside linebackers coach, assistant linebackers coaches that are hands-on. I think you can have, like, it's like a max of 10. I think beyond, like, head coach and your coordinators, or maybe including them, it's like you can have, like, 12 staffers who are like hands-on coaches. So all those guys you see as like analysts, like special teams analysts, offensive, defensive analysts, those guys aren't actually allowed to coach players. They're strictly dealing with the coaching staff. It's really weird. Nebraska has had underwent some kind of penalty because of an infraction by, I think it was a special teams analyst, improperly working with players. It was a really bizarre story to me. So, anyway, but Florida, their staff, just so many staffers. Also, their picture was weird because the staffers were also wearing blue along with the team. Whereas pretty much every other coaching staff I was seeing like had the coaches in a different color, usually white. That way they kind of stood out a little more. Which for normal people it probably stands out just fine because they're wearing polos, not jerseys. But, you know, I'm half blind, so. With that being said, let's get into this AFC West preview. Let's close that. And we're going to slide down here to the AFC West. We'll start with the Denver Broncos. Okay, so the AFC West has a pretty, I would tier it with, there's the Chiefs and the Chargers, and then the Raiders and the Broncos. Now, that doesn't mean that one of those teams, depending on injury luck or other things, may not finish ahead of one of those teams, but I do think the Chiefs and Chargers are, like, I have them ahead of them in the pecking order. And I'm going to wait till I go through all the teams to talk about where I have them rated this time, because I'm still kind of deciding. This is a really tough division, because deciding between the Raiders and the Broncos and the Chargers and the Chiefs has been kind of difficult for me. So, getting into the receiver room, there's a little bit of prove it here, and some of these guys have had injury concerns, and of course Tim Patrick is out for the season. But I really think they've got a great 1-2 in Cortland Sutton and Jerry Jeudy, who I think both will have their best seasons of their career this year. This frees up KJ Hamler to slide into the 3 spot. I think you'll see him and Jeudy toggle between playing outside and the slot this season. Let's see. They drafted Montrell Washington in the 5th round this year. He might not have made the roster which I think he is now. If Tim Patrick was around, I don't know if he makes the roster. He's out of Sanford, small school guy. He's kind of a tiny guy, 5'10", 170, which they have a lot of small guys here. Like KJ Hamler's not big. KJ Hamler's, I think, 5'9", maybe 5'10", but he's somewhere like, under 6 feet. Last time I checked, under 190 pounds. Kendall Hinton is 6 foot 195. I mean, he's not tiny, but but he's more of a slot movement type guy. Oh my goodness, I'm tired of having to close that every time. We got Tyree Cleveland, 7th round pick in 2020 out of Florida, 6'2", 205 pounds, and he's got some good speed. Cleveland, Hamler, Hinton, Washington all should have roles or be kind of in the mix on special teams. Undrafted Brandon, or they had picked up Brandon Johnson, undrafted this offseason. They drafted Seth Williams 6th round last year. He's more of a big-bodied receiver, kind of like Courtland Sutton. I think if they don't keep him on the roster, that's going to be a mistake. But if he doesn't earn a spot, I'm probably the one who's actually wrong there. They also have Jalen Virgil, who they picked up as undrafted, and Darius Shepard there. Williams is a big-bodied, like, catching traffic, sideline perimeter guy, who I think with Patrick out actually is a little more important even, that they keep him on the roster. They might run 7 guys at receiver this year, but we'll see. Cleveland's listed at 6'2", but he doesn't, like, I don't remember him using his size in college. Like other guys who are 6'2" or taller use it. But I like the top of their receiver room, and if guys can stay healthy, which each of Sutton, Judy, and Hamler have dealt with injury issues, I think their receiver room is going to be in really good shape. It never fails. I don't get any calls all day. I go to stream and I get calls and alerts out the wazoo. Okay, moving to the offensive line. Grant Bowles took him a little to develop, which was interesting because he was an older prospect. But Grant Bowles has turned into a really good left tackle. Dalton Risner sliding in to guard. I think he played some right tackle at one point, but he definitely has fit better at guard. Going into year 3, Lloyd Cushenberry really needs to show that he's the long-term starter there. Quinn Miners, from all reports, has won the right guard spot. I was a huge fan of him last year, one of my favorite small school prospects in recent years. I thought he was going to go in round 2, so I love the value there. And they picked up Billy Turner, who right now is listed as their starting right tackle. I think their line's going to be pretty good. The big kind of disappointment here for the Broncos from a money standpoint, though, is Graham Glasgow, who's a former big-ticket free agent of theirs, is now basically a swing lineman. But we'll see come the beginning of the season. I believe Glasgow can slide into center, too, so, I mean, it's not the worst thing, but from a money standpoint, I guess it's nice that, Risner, Miners, Cushenberry are all on rookie contracts. Turner, you were able to get at a pretty decent price. They also have former 6th round pick Netani Moody. He's backing up the other guard spot. He's a guy that I thought should have gone higher than his draft slot that year. They also drafted Luke Wattenberg in the 5th round as a developmental center, either to back up Cushenberry long term or eventually replace him. Either way, wasn't a bad selection. Backup tackles, long term. Cameron Fleming's been a long term veteran backup in the league. He's bounced around a little bit, but you could do worse. They've got Calvin Anderson. They've got a bunch of guys at tackle here. They've also got Zach Johnson, Quinn Bailey, and undrafted free agent Sebastian Gutierrez. Those last three guys probably aren't making the roster. And also Michael Neese, undrafted free agent at guard. Once again, doubt he makes the roster. Moving to tight end. So, as part of the Russell Wilson trade, they traded Noah Fant. Along with the draft picks, Noah Fant. Was it Shelby Harris? And Drew Lock. So you lose out on Noah Fant. Noah Fant, great young tight end. I think you're going to see Albert O. I'm not going to try and pronounce his last name. Who was really productive in college at Missouri. He had a huge 2018 season. 2019 wasn't as good, but that whole team kind of cratered in 2019. It wasn't necessarily his fault his production was down. I thought he was a great value in the fourth round 2020. He's going to be in a great position to reap the benefits because, I mean, you're bringing in Russell Wilson, although he hasn't always used his tight ends as heavily as he could have. They also drafted Greg Dulcich, who there were a lot of people had moved him to their tight end one. His actual long speed is better than his 40 time. He's really tall, long, not the best blocker, but he'll give you some effort there. But he's a really good seam option, run after the catch option. They also have Eric Tomlinson, Eric Sauber, who's been on the roster for a couple years now. And they also picked up Dylan Parham. Which it's saying, you know, he was a college free agent, but they actually picked him up after I think the Chargers released, or wait. That's Dylan Parham, not Donald Parham. Think of a different Parham. Sorry. I like their tight end room, but there's a lot of projection and a lot of these guys have to prove it. But they've got a lot of talent between Alberto and Greg Dulcich. Of course, quarterback that traded for Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson's going to be, I mean, obviously a massive leap over what they were getting at quarterback. They brought in Josh Johnson as their backup. Josh Johnson's trying to go for the most teams in a career record. He's coming for your throne, Fitzy. And they also still have Brett Rypien around. He and Johnson are going to battle for that backup spot. I feel like Johnson will win it because he's more similar to Russ, but good to see Josh Johnson around, in my opinion. Running back, they were actually able to bring back Melvin Gordon, but he will be the number 2 in that committee behind Javonte Williams. They also have Mike Boone, former backup in Minnesota, who's really solid, really good number 3 back. They have Divine Ozigbo and Jaquan Hardy as well there. Hardy they picked up from San Francisco. Or I think he had spent time in San Francisco. That's a street free agent, actually. But really, those top 3 guys are the only guys you're really probably going to have to worry about. And then Andrew Beck at fullback. He also can play tight end. So he's pretty versatile. Moving to defense, you've got Draymond Jones, DJ Jones, and Deshaun Williams. Draymond has been solid after being a third-round pick in 2019. They signed DJ Jones from San Fran. That was a big loss for San Francisco's interior defense and a really nice get for the Broncos' run defense. Deshaun Williams, they picked him up off the street in 2019, and he stuck around. They like him. They got another really good value in the draft this year. 4th rounder Ioma. Uwazurike out of Iowa State. He was really productive at Iowa State. One of the best defensive players in the Big 12 in recent seasons. Some people might even say he was the best defensive player in the Big 12 the last couple seasons. but especially on the lines. But I think that was a really good pickup. I still believe in McTelvin Najim, their 2020 third-round pick out of Arkansas, who just hasn't hit yet. But I remember when he was coming out, I looked at him as like, this guy reminds me of Jarrell Casey. And they've got Mike Purcell as a backup nose tackle. One of my favorite late-round picks, Matt Henningsen out of Wisconsin. I really liked his tape, and I think he's going to make this roster. And they also have Jonathan Harris. But, you know, their front three, their interior line should be pretty good, especially DJ Jones. The issue is going to be, like, how much pass rush are they going to get from Jones, Williams, Ajim, Uwazurike, honestly. Moving to the edge here, Bradley Chubb, you don't have to worry too much about that. As long as he's healthy, they've got a really, really good number one pass rusher. They signed Randy Gregory in free agency. I think that was a good get. He's actually really come on the last couple years for the Cowboys, and he's got a lot of potential, a lot of raw physical ability that he's started to actually use. So they got a pretty good pass rush tandem. It's crazy, though, that tandem is, at best, third in their division, in my opinion. Behind them, you've got 2019 undrafted free agent Malik Reed. And this year they got Nick Benito in the second round. I thought that was a really good value pick. I liked, I talked about this back in the spring. I really liked that football guy. His comp for Nick Benito was a literal ball of lightning. Because that's what he is. He's like electric. He's fast. He's going to get where he's going faster. He's not going to get there, though, is the way I would put it. And behind them, you've got Aaron Patrick, 2021 third-round pick, Baron Browning, who I think will probably end up jumping Malik Reed on the depth chart, as well as last year's 7th-round pick Jonathan Cooper and Jonathan Kongbo, who went undrafted a couple years ago. I know he was on I can't remember if he was on the Saints or the Niners. He was on one of those two teams. Now he's on the Broncos. He's a strong, athletic guy, but, I mean, he's pretty raw. Technique-wise, he's kind of just battering ram type player. But I like him. Former Tennessee Vol. And Browning can play some some off-ball linebacker too. Like, they see him as being pretty versatile, but and I like Jonathan Cooper. I thought he was a guy who went way later than he should have last year. But not every pick pans out. Not everybody I like. It's like I like the value, but that doesn't mean they're going to hit. Because there are guys that like I love that bust every year. Or who are drafted every year that end up busts. You don't get them all. At interior linebacker or inside linebacker, off-ball linebacker, your more run defending, coverage oriented guys. You've got Josie Jewell, who they re-signed, and they have Jonas Griffith, who they traded for from the Niners, who I don't love as their second starter. I really thought they didn't do enough at inside linebacker. They let two of their top 3 guys go. They also brought in Alex Singleton. Some people are hot. He's really polarizing because he's going to be a good special teams guy, but some people think he's also good at linebacker. Some people don't think he's as good as other people think he is at linebacker. And they also have 2020 fifth round pick Justin Strnad. It's Strnad. I struggle to pronounce his name. As well as Barrington Wade and Kanai Mauga, who's an undrafted free agent this year. The new coaching staff seems to be taking a inside linebacker is whatever it is kind of approach. Like, it seems like that's kind of their low investment position, if you will. But I like Josie Jewell a lot. I loved him in that draft. He was a guy that I was like, he's going to go on day 3, and he's going to turn into a solid starter, and people are going to be like, we should have drafted him on day 2. Anyway. But we'll see if Griffith or Singleton, like, just blow me away. Or, blow away my expectations. Anyway, at corner, Pat Surtain from day 1 has been exactly what we expected. Really freaking good. Across from him, they've got Ronald Darby, and they picked up Quan Williams to play slot corner, which I thought was a really good move. They still have Michael Oyamuda, third-round pick from 2020, who I still really like as their fourth corner. Asang Basie, also backing up outside. Their current backup at slot corner is Damari Mathis, who they got in the 4th round. I thought that was a great pick. Mathis is a really smart, instinctive corner out of Pittsburgh. I think he's going to be a really good slot corner. Or should I say, he has the potential to be a great slot corner. And he might be able to play outside some too. But he's going to fit really good in the slot. They also have 7th round pick Fayon Hicks. Bleswan Austin is here. Undrafted free agent Jaquan McMillan. And Donnie Lewis Jr. at corner. But I would definitely expect, Surtain, Darby, Williams to be your starters. I think Mathis is going to get a good number of snaps. Ojemudia is going to be your main, rotate-in corner. Basie's going to make the roster. Beyond Basie, I don't know if any of those other guys will. Depends on special teams roles, to be honest. At safety, of course, you've got a really nice starting duo. Justin Simmons, one of the best in the league. Kareem Jackson is a really solid veteran who keeps hanging around. He's not as athletic as he used to be, but Kareem Jackson's a really good safety, really smart player. And if he starts ceding snaps to some of the guys they drafted in recent years, like Caden Stearns, he's still going to be a really good asset as basically an assistant defensive backs coach, because he also played corner. He started off his career as a corner. And there's a guy I'm missing, and I'm guessing he's on IR. Let's see. Looking for him. Unless they cut him. Wow, don't tell me they cut him. They did. They cut Johnson. I think that was his last name. He was safety from Indiana. I loved him. I'm not seeing him on their depth chart. Dude, that's a bummer. So Caden Stearns, they like Stearns, 5th round pick last year out of Texas. I think the guy's name, it's not Jamar Johnson. I'll figure it out later. They've also got P.J. Locke, J.R. Reed, and they drafted Delarian Turner-Gill in the 5th round out of Oklahoma. I cannot believe. I think his name was Josh Johnson. He was safety from Indiana, and I loved him. I thought he was going to be at worst, a solid rotational safety in the league. Never a superstar, but he was just too smart and tricksy to me to not be able to make it, especially as much too high as teams are running now. Because he can play deep and too high, and he can come down and play pretty well in underneath coverage and over the middle coverage, kind of like in the intermediate game. Man, that makes me sad. You don't hit them all. Anyway, really like their secondary, especially their starters. Now they start dealing with injuries. I mean, Stearns is a nice third safety, but Turner, Yell, or one of those other guys are going to have to step up way more than they've ever stepped up. Moving to special teams for the Broncos, they've got Sam Martin and Brandon McManus. They brought in Corliss Waitman to compete with Martin, but I think Martin will keep that job regardless. And McManus isn't losing that kicking job. And they have Jacob Bobe Moyer as their long snapper. I tell you, you want to find some of the most interesting names in the league, go to the long snapper position. And McManus, of course, will be their kickoff specialist because that guy's leg is ridiculous. And there's Montrell Washington. They've got him listed as their starting kick and punt returner, so he's making the roster. Which probably and Hinton is also there. Michael Oyemuda is also there, and Tyree Cleveland, which probably means they're gonna keep 7 receivers. Seth Williams is gonna make this roster. Some injured reserve guys: running back Demarie Crockett, formerly of North Dakota State, rookie Christopher Allen, linebacker from Alabama, Marquise Spencer, Casey Tucker, who's an offensive lineman, and offensive lineman Tom Compton is on the reserve physically unable to perform list. So, that being said, I like the Broncos' chances this year, which I like all these teams' chances. The problem is you've got 4 of probably the 15 best teams in the league in the same division. It's kind of, it's really crazy. But I'll say this. I think Nathaniel Hackett, which I know a lot of people have talked about, you're going to run the Russell Wilson offense with Russ coming to Denver. But I think Hackett he's going to have a hand in shaping that offense. And I think there's a lot of things that they're going to do that will fit what Russell Wilson is good at. Hackett's coming over from being the offensive coordinator in Green Bay the last few years. Wow, that mic is so sensitive. It picked that up. Anyway, I do think that Hackett's going to shape that offense in a way that's going to get Russell Wilson to play more within the structure of the offense. He's also going to be playing behind the best offensive line he's played in since like maybe in 5 years that he's played behind, at least on paper. But moving on from the Broncos, I really like them. I think their defense is going to be more than capable this season. I think really, I don't see an area of the team necessarily severely downgraded in, maybe at tight end, but and I would say middle linebacker definitely in this deep. I don't like the position as much as I liked it last year, but everywhere else, I'd say they got better. And if you can say that, you've got really good. You've got a really good place to start going into the season. Moving to the Chiefs. So Marquez Valdez-Scantling and Juju Smith-Schuster have been brought into this team through free agency. They still have McCole Hardman. He picked up a minor injury, but it was pretty minor. I think he's back at practice. They also drafted Sky Moore in the second round. There were some people who were giving him first round buzz. I think Moore is going to fit in really well. And I know he's listed in the second strings here. Sky Moore is going to be more productive than McCole Hardman or Marquez Valdez-Scantling this year. I'm calling that now. I'm a big fan of Sky. Juju definitely is going to be in the slot. And Juju's going to have a really productive season this year. Especially if he's healthy. This is the best quarterback play he's gotten since the very beginning of his career. And maybe better than even that version of Ben Roethlisberger. Well, I would say it is, but, you know. Beyond those top four guys, you also have Darius Fountain and Justin Watson, who've kind of surprised jumping up as high as they have, because they're beating out guys like last year's fifth-round pick Cornell Powell, Corey Coleman, who they took a flyer on. Josh Gordon is on this roster, believe it or not. He's still around. They also have Aaron Parker, and Jarian Ealy is listed as a slot receiver, not a running back, which is interesting. But and they're an interesting team because they have three receivers on their depth chart wearing numbers in the 20s, which Ealy also is a running back. I like Moore wearing 24. I think it's fun. And Aaron Parker wearing 21. I'm not super familiar with him, so. But their wide receiver position, I think, is going to be really good this year. In that, I'm kind of betting on better injury luck for some of these guys, and I just think Tyreek Hill's moving out of the way, or being moved out of the way, is going to allow Hardman to do more of what he's best at. Like, he's going to fill a lot. He and Marquez Valdez-Scantling are going to be doing a lot of those deep overs and stretching the field, which is going to give a lot of room for Juju Smith-Schuster and Sky Moore to play out of the slot and do stuff in the intermediate areas of the field. Not saying they're better at receiver necessarily, but they're more diverse. And they have more, and they still have as many guys who can do kind of the same thing. Like, Valdez-Scantling's not replacing Tyreek Hill, but he is really fast and a great deep threat and crosser threat. And it also could be kind of interesting to see like what we get out of some of these other, guys beyond Moore, like who makes the roster. All right, moving to offensive line. Now, this is going to be, in my opinion, one of the best offensive lines in the league, which I don't think that's a hot take. Orlando Brown is a legit top tackle. Joe Tunney, great on the interior. Creed Humphrey already challenging for best center in football as a rookie. That didn't surprise me. Trey Smith stepping in and being a plug-and-play starter didn't shock me either. I figured his his medical history would hurt him. I didn't think it would hurt him that bad, though, that he fell the 6th round. If he had not had the blood clotting issue in his lungs in college, Trey Smith would have been a first rounder as a guard. And he can also play tackle. He has the length and athleticism to slide out to tackle. And they've got Andrew Wiley listed as their right tackle right now, which is not ideal, but he's not supposed to be the starter there. Currently, where is he? Lucas Niang is on the physically unable to perform list. He will be back. He's going to, and I believe he should be back early in the season. He's going to start most of their games at right tackle. But that's the one weakness right now with Niang hurt. Gary Jennings. Jennings is also a receiver, isn't he? Wearing 23. He's on injured reserve. You got Derek Gore on injured reserve. And Justin Ross, who they brought in as an undrafted free agent, is back on injured reserve. I think his career's over. Unfortunately. The backups on the offensive line, you've got, like I said, eventually Niang's going to take over that starting right tackle spot. Andrew Wiley will move to a swing tackle spot, which is definitely more his speed. They did draft Darian Kennard in the 5th round. At worst, long term, he will eventually move into guard. But I think as a right tackle, and he could end up challenging Wiley for like that 3rd tackle spot. They also have Gary Christian, former 2nd round pick, I believe, out of Louisville. I believe Philly drafted him. He's their backup at left tackle right now. They also have another former, well, he went in the 5th round, I think. Prince Tega Wanogbo out of Auburn. Also believe he was an former Eagle. Anyway, and they also have Roderick Johnson. They have a really deep tackle group. Because I think a number of these guys would be like Johnson, Wanogbo on other teams would probably be their 4th or even 3rd best tackle. Well, at least 4th best. So those guys might not even make the roster. That's pretty good for you. On the interior, they have 2019 7th round pick Nick Allegretti. Austin Reeder is the backup at center. That's a really nice, he could start for some teams. You also have Mike Caliendo and Vitaly Gurman as undrafted free agents. I like Gurman. I like that pickup, but he probably isn't going to make the roster or the final roster. But he could stick around on the practice squad. But they're starting offensive line. And if Wiley is any better than he was a couple seasons ago, where he just looked like a total disaster in the Super Bowl, he could be fine filling in for Niang. But once Niang's back, I think there's an argument they have the best starting 5 at offensive line in the league. Moving to tight end, another great tight end room. Now, Blake Bell had a weird, as we talked about yesterday, unusual hip flexor injury that he had to have surgery on, but he's supposed to be back pretty quickly. Of course, you've got Travis Kelce starting at tight end. If this guy has a couple more, or 2-3 more seasons of what he's been doing the last 7 years in him, or 7-8 years in him, he might go down as the greatest tight end of all time. Because what he's doing is ridiculous. And then behind Bell, you've got Noah Gray, 5th round pick last year. Really like his upside. They like Josh Fortson a lot. Jody Fortson a lot. Former undrafted guy that they've taken time to develop on their practice squad. Sorry, I'm looking for my cursor here. And then behind them, they have Matt Bushman and Jordan Franks, who have both been around the league for a handful of years. But they're going to carry 4 tight ends. Fortson, Gray, Bell, and Kelce are all going to make the roster. Patrick Mahomes, of course, is going to be their starter. They've still got Chad Henne. I like that they picked up Shane Buechele undrafted last year. And they picked up Dustin Crum undrafted this year. I feel like those guys Crum and Buechele are going to stick around the league a long time as backups. Particularly for, it's like, I think they fit Andy Reid's offense. But any coaches who have ties to the Andy Reid tree, those guys will be around. I was a big fan of Dustin Crum this year as a long-term, like, solid backup. So, running back, Clyde Edwards-Helaire is slated to be the starter. We'll see if year 3 is the year he finally breaks out. They brought Jerick McKinnon back, and right now he looks to be their number 2 guy. They drafted Isaiah Pacheco out of I believe it was Rutgers. In the 7th round, dude can fly like 4.37, 4.38, 40 speed, like sub 4.4 speed. He could bring some real like explosiveness to the offense in the run game. They also picked up Ronald Jones, who right now is listed at number 4 on the depth chart. They also have Tayon Fleet Davis, who they picked up undrafted this year, but I don't think he's a threat to make the roster. And then they still have Michael Burton at fullback. I think their running back room's going to be that's going to be really interesting to see what happens here. Because some of the moves they made, like Ronald Jones, they brought in Jerick McKinnon last year, keeping him around, drafting Pacheco. I know it was a 7th round pick, but they've made they brought all 3 of these guys in because, I mean, yes, it's great to have great running back depth, but they definitely have questions about Clyde Edwards-Helaire there, and he has got to produce this year. And I hope he does, because it'll make me look a lot better for having him as running back 1 in 2020. Anyway, moving on to defense, they picked up Carlos Dunlap this offseason on the cheap. They reworked Frank Clark's contract. That's the worst edge duo in the division. What's going to be really interesting, though, is if George Karlaftis can take Carlos Dunlap's starting spot at some point, which wouldn't shock me. I'm not as high as some other people on Karlaftis, but I think Karlaftis is a really good pass rush prospect, really good edge player. I just thought other people had higher ceilings. They also have Mike Dana, 5th round pick from 2020 on the edge. Malik Herring, who went undrafted last year. Joshua Kando, who they drafted in the 4th round last year. And Azur Kamara. Or Azur Kamara. Clark's been underwhelming for several years now. He's had like a handful of big games, but he's not been worth near what they've been paying him. Dunlap, he's a solid veteran, but he's not been as productive rushing the passer in recent years either. It's the reason they drafted Karlaftis in the 1st round. But they really need these young guys behind Dunlap and Clark to show something this year. Or they need to get more out of Dunlap and Clark than they've been able to, and for Dunlap than, say, Seattle was able to get out of him the last couple years. Moving inside, they're much better. Chris Jones is arguably the best interior pass rusher in the league after Aaron Donald. And he's definitely in that conversation for the second best interior defensive lineman in the league behind Donald, with DeForest Buckner and Jeffrey Simmons. Derek Nandi is a really good run defending nose tackle type. He's been more than solid for them. They like Kalen Saunders, who they drafted in the 3rd round 2019. He's been solid for them. Tayshawn Wharton has been a solid rotational piece as an undrafted guy in 2020. They picked up Danny Shelton, former, he was he was supposed to be what Vita Vea ended up becoming. They were both big nose tackles coming out of college. And actually, I think they both played for the University of Washington. I know Shelton did. But Shelton hasn't been near the player Vita Vea is. They also they have Taylor Stallworth here as well, and Matt Dickerson, who I hate to see leave the Titans. He's been a pretty solid rotational kind of run defending defensive lineman for us. They also have Kehinde Ojani Hassan, who they picked up going into training camp. Those last two guys aren't making the roster. Their defensive line's fine, but I would say, their interior's really good, but the edge, I think, is definitely the weakest in the division. Which, considering how strong the edge position is for every other team in the division, they're doing better than they're doing better than a good number of other teams in the league. But that depends on, in my opinion, Frank Clark being what he's paid to be. Now, moving to off-ball linebacker, they've got Willie Gay and Nick Bolton. I think Willie Gay, I don't know if he's still dealing with some legal trouble. I know he had something come up, I think, last year, but we'll see. Nick Bolton was great in year one. I wasn't as high him as some other people who had him in the first round mix. I should have apparently listened. I thought he was fine, but I was like, I don't know if I want to draft him in the second round. Well, he turned out to be great from the start. So if Gay plays every game and Bolton plays every game, they're really good at linebacker. They also drafted Leo Chanel in the 3rd round, who I just figured would go to the Patriots, but the Patriots have kind of changed what they're doing at linebacker. I think Chanel is going to be really good for them, and he can play some edge as well. Chanel can move around. I think he's going to be a really fun piece for Steve Spagnuolo, because Spags loves to blitz and come up with creative ways to bring pressure. Chanel's going to do that, and he can cover underneath as well, and he's a disruptive force. Sometimes he can cause chaos for both your defense as well as the offense, but if you've got guys like Nick Bolton around who can clean up those messes, he's a great guy to have around. They also have Elijah Lee, Jermaine Carter, Darius Harris, and undrafted free agents Mike Rose and Jack Cochran. Mike Rose out of Iowa State, I kind of was shocked he went undrafted. That guy, I believe he was a 4-year starter at Iowa State. Really smart, intelligent. Another one of those guys who knows where to be and is where he needs to be and is really good at kind of cleaning up some chaos. Wouldn't shock me if he makes the final roster, or if eventually he's playing a role later in the season on this team. He's the kind of player I would bet on if I was the Chiefs' coaching staff. Moving to corner. Now, corner's a little interesting for them because they lost their top corner, Tre'Davious West. But Rashad Fenton has been really good since being a 6th-round pick in 2019. He was a big part of their Super Bowl run. Trent McDuffie, who they drafted in the 1st round, They're listing as an outside corner. Some people thought he might play safety or be kind of their new Tyrann Mathieu. We'll see, but I think McDuffie's a really good corner. They also have L'Jarius Sneed, 4th round pick in 2020, listed as their nickelback. He's been good. And they did attack the secondary with their draft this year. Joshua Williams, 4th round pick or a 4th round pick this year. I'm a big fan of Joshua Williams out of Fayetteville State. There were a lot of really good small schools corners in this draft. And he's got great size at 6'3", 193. He's got really good press technique. And depending on how quickly he develops, that's going to have a big impact on how they end up using Trent McDuffie. They also drafted Jalen Watson in the 7th round out of Washington State. Another 6'2", 197-pound corner with good arm length. You know, it seems like they're wanting to do something specific or develop a specific type of corner for the future outside. They're wanting length out there to deal with a lot of these long athletic receivers that are coming out. And then their backup slot right now is DiCaprio Boodle, one of the best names from last year's draft class. Went undrafted last year. They really like him. They think he can play a role for them. And they also drafted Nazia Johnson in the 7th round. Another late round flyer pick. Now, he's a little smaller, 5'10", 200. Now, he's stout built, though. Built like a running back, kind of out of Marshall. I don't see him. I didn't have him rated ahead of, or I'll say this. I didn't even really have him rated this year. I don't think I listed him in my corner ratings videos. I know I talked about Joshua Williams. I think I touched on Jalen Watson. I think I had him at the very end of my rankings. But I didn't have Johnson rated. Didn't think he was going to get drafted. I mean, he barely got drafted. And then they also have Chris Lemons at corner. But this is a team that has bet on their ability to get adequate play out of young corners early, as seen by the fact that Fenton and Sneed, and not just at corner, in the secondary too, Fenton and Sneed have played key roles early in their careers. Same with Shavarius West, who was a late round guy. And I mean, we're talking about day 3 picks that they've been developing. Now drafting McDuffie in the 1st round, they've got Williams and Watson and Johnson and an undrafted guy like Boodle. They're betting on their ability to continue to develop defensive backs. And I'm not gonna say they won't. Now, safety is the interesting thing. They let Mathieu walk. I think they overpaid Justin Reed. He's penciled in to start next to 2019 second-round pick Juan Thornhill. They have Deion Bush, who's been, around the league for a while as a backup safety, special teams player. They drafted Brian Cook in the 2nd round out of Cincinnati. I was a little higher than I had him rated. So we'll see. But, I still like his chances to be a solid starting NFL safety. There were just, which some safeties did go a little higher than I thought, just because it's safety and I didn't realize the demand was going to be where it was. Like Cine ending up in the 1st round, he had the talent for it, but there were some other guys who I had rated ahead of Cook that went later. But the Chiefs have done a really good job of drafting and developing, so we'll see if they prove me wrong. You also have Zane Anderson and Devon Key here, undrafted free agents last year. one of those might make the roster. But overall, this is a solid roster. Their defense, I think, is going to be solid. And if the offense is what it usually is for the Chiefs, that should be enough for them to contend for a Super Bowl title. Moving to special teams, Tommy Townsend, good young punter. Harrison Butker, one of the best kickers in the league. James Winchester is arguably the best long snapper in the league. McCall Hardman is listed as their starting punt returner, not a shock. Isaiah Pacheco coming in as the starting kick returner, not a shock either. They've got Coleman listed here as second at kick return, so that might hint that he's going to make the roster. McDuffie is their second punt returner. Interesting. And then they've got Sky Moore, which I figured he might factor in at returner too. And out of these guys on injured reserve and the pup list here, Niang's going to make the roster. I don't think any of these other guys were going to make the roster. Maybe Justin Ross could have, but health is just not permitted for him. All right, let's get to the Raiders. I really like what the Raiders did this offseason. I like the McDaniels hire. People clown him for backing out of the Colts job and because of the stuff with the Broncos. That guy's learned a lot. He backed out of the Colts job because he wasn't, there were probably multiple reasons, but if he wasn't comfortable taking the job, he shouldn't have taken the job. I think that shows some maturity, actually. So they traded for Devontae Adams. And, as good as the receiver classes have been lately, you kind of wonder, should you have traded first and second round picks for Adams? Adams is probably the best receiver in the league. In recent years, it's hard to argue. He's definitely in that conversation. He has to be. Hunter Renfrow really broke out last year, is one of the elite slot receivers in the league, and creative route runners in the league. They got Mac Hollins, who they brought over from Miami. He's kind of bounced around a little bit. He's big, like 6'3", 6'4", 220, with 4.41, I believe, speed. Plays college ball at the University of North Carolina, I believe. As like a guy to put on the field to be a contested catch, like field stretcher, he fits, but he's not like some super productive guy. I like them bringing Keelan Cole as well. I think he can be a solid role playing receiver. They also have Tyron Johnson, DJ Turner, Dylan Stoner, who went undrafted last year, I believe out of Oklahoma State. I like Stoner a lot as a role-playing receiver. They also have Isaiah Zuber and Justin Hall, who was a undrafted free agent this year. You're not in love with their depth at receiver, but you love having Adams and Renfrow. Because you've arguably got the best receiver in the league, and he has a relationship with Derek Carr. He chose Derek Carr over Aaron Rodgers. The Packers offered him basically the same contract. They offered to match. He said, "No, I really want to play I want to go to Las Vegas. I want to play with the Raiders. I always wanted to play for the Raiders, and I want to play with Derek," which should say a lot. I think that should say a lot. And the Raiders, ponied up first, second round picks to get him. I think that was a really good trade for the Packers. I know people are like, you're contending, but value-wise, I think that was a good move. And I think that was I still understand the logic, and I like the move for the Raiders. Moving on to the offensive line, Colton Miller has developed into a really good starting left tackle. Andre James, he's not as good as Rodney Hudson, but he's cheaper. And they actually, probably still should have gotten more value for Larry Hudson than they got, but that trade has not been a disaster. They're hoping Alex Leatherwood is going to take over the starting right tackle spot from Brandon Parker, who hasn't developed quite as well as Miller did, although they did extend Parker. But he's now in their swing tackle spot. They've got Jackson Barton as well there, and they drafted Thayer Munford Jr. in the 7th round. He's also listed as a backup at tackle. I always thought he would slide into guard once he got to the pros, but we'll see. And they also have Bamidele Olaseni, who's an undrafted free agent at tackle. Moving to the inside, John Simpson, they drafted in the 4th round in 2020. He's their starter there. Lester Cotton Sr. was an undrafted free agent in 2019. I was kind of surprised he went undrafted that year. Those are their slated starters, along with Andre James inside. Dylan Parham, they drafted in the 3rd round. I'm a huge Parham fan. Thought he was a top 50 player. He should be. I feel like he should take one of the starting spots at some point. Hornets Grassu's been in the league for a while, been a backup center in the league for a while, but he's nothing to, oh wow, Grassu's our backup center. Maybe he's one of the 20 best backup centers in the league. Maybe. Like what I'm saying is maybe he's top 50 at his position. Jermaine Illuminor is also here, which I think he started some games at guard for them last year. They also have Jordan Meredith and Alex Bars. I think the interior is still going to be interesting, but Parham's eventually going to take one of those starting spots this year. And I don't think he's going to let it go for 10 years unless they let someone else sign him away. It's also going to be interesting with Leatherwood, because Leatherwood, to me, probably should be starting at guard. But, if he's better than Brandon Parker or Jackson Barton at tackle, you need him out at tackle. So, moving to tight end, Darren Waller, one of the best tight ends in the league. They have a great tight end room as well. Foster Morrow, really like. Nick Bowers, undrafted free agent in 2020. They have Jacob Hollister. They also have Jasper Horsted, and they picked up Cole Fotheringham as an undrafted free agent. I think Waller-Moreau is a really good 1-2 punch at tight end. Bowers is fine as a 3rd-string tight end. Same with Hollister. Hollister's more of a receiving kind of only guy, though. So it'll be interesting to see if he makes the roster or they go with a better blocker for kind of at depth tight end. Quarterback, you got Derek Carr. He's able to he's able to achieve top 10 quarterback play. You're not going to win a Super Bowl in spite of him. He's going to help you contend. They brought in Jarrett Stidham as a backup. Josh McDaniels is familiar with him because they've spent the last few years together in New England. And they also picked up Chase Garbers, undrafted, out of the University of Cal. He's got interesting movement skills, but I kind of started off because the back end of this class was just kind of all over the place. I liked his athleticism, but I don't necessarily love how he plays the quarterback position, so he kind of fell on my board eventually. But decent light flyer for your 3rd quarterback spot. They'll probably only run 2 quarterbacks on the active roster, though, this year. Running back, Josh Jacobs is back, but the moves they keep making at running back make it seem like Jacobs isn't making it past his rookie contract with them because they did. I mean, they signed, which it was the previous regime did this, but they signed Kenyon Drake to a pretty substantial like running back contract, especially for a guy who's like a second stringer, and he was good for them last year. They brought in Brandon Bolden, who will play a special teams role for him. They drafted Zamir White in the 4th round. I thought that was a great move. He's got a lot of upside, and is one of the more powerful and straight line explosive runners in this draft class. They also have Amir Abdullah. They have a lot of running backs on the roster, by the way, which isn't a shock for a Belichick team, especially this stage of the year. They also drafted Britton Brown in the 7th round. I didn't have him a draftable grade on him, but, whatever. They also have Austin Walter. I don't think Abdullah's going to make the roster, but he can play on special teams. Drake's going to make the roster. I think he's out right now with an injury. Let's look. And they had also picked up Sincere McCormick undrafted, but he's on IR because of injury. Kyler Fackrell, who was going to factor into the edge rotations on injured reserve. Micah Kaiser, who they picked up at linebackers on injured reserve. That's unfortunate. And Jordan Jenkins is here in IR. I'm not seeing Drake. Did they cut Kenyon Drake? I'm actually kind of confused here. I must have missed that. That's kind of wild, in my opinion. And they have Jacob Johnson at fullback, who would have thought came over to Vegas from New England. That's really interesting that they cut Drake. Drake was good last year. Huh. Well, that gives a chance for one of those other guys to make it as the 4th running back. But I think White's going to, as the season progresses, get a lot more carries. But I wonder, this is interesting. Interesting. All right, going to defense. Chandler Jones and Max Crosby as your starting edge players. Man, it's hard to say who I like better. Well, I think you would put the Chargers ahead of the Raiders there, but it's close. Crosby was awesome last year. And Jones and Mack have both had their own injury concerns, and they're on the wrong side of 30, but those two guys are so good. So's Joey. But the Raiders have a top-notch pass rushing duo. They really like Malcolm Kuntz, who they drafted out of Buffalo in the 3rd round last year. Clelin Ferrell's still on the roster, and he can slide inside on passing downs, like obvious pass situations, but he's been more of a run defense, and that's about it, kind of edge player for him, which is not great when you drafted the guy as early as you drafted him, which was a reach then. Of course, we've got a whole new front office and coaching staff now. They also have Tashawn Bauer. They picked up Zach Van Valkenburg, undrafted. I like Van Valkenburg. I think he's going to make the roster. And Myron Tagovailoa Amosa out of Notre Dame. I thought that was another good pickup. He can play kind of inside-outside. He can do what Colin Farrell's doing for you, just way cheaper and without wasting a high-end draft pick. On the interior, they've really done a lot of work. They've kept Jonathan Hankins, again, which was smart. He's been a underrated, really solid, run-down player. Signed Bilal Nichols to a great contract. They brought in Andrew Billings. They brought in Kyle Pecco. Drafted Neil Farrell Jr. out of LSU in the 4th round. I thought that was a really good move. Then, and he's big big old nose tackle run stuffer. Future replacement for Jonathan Hankins. 5th round pick Matthew Butler out of Tennessee. Had 5.5, 6 sacks for the Vols last year. Was really productive in the new, more attacking defensive line style that Heupel's coaching staff brought in. Butler, I think, has a lot of upside as a 3 technique interior disruptor. And that's exactly the kind of guy the Raiders need. They need an explosive interior pass rusher to match all these guys on the edge. And they also have Tyler Lancaster and another former Vol, Kendall Vickers, who they've had around since 2020. I really like the front four for the Raiders and their depth there. The interior is solid, and the edge is elite with depth and upside. So, the upside coming mostly from Kuntz, but, they've got some solid young guys, too, that I like I said, I really like. Moving to linebacker, last year's 3rd round pick Devon Diablo, who is a converted safety from Virginia Tech. I mean, he was a big safety, and he's going to move around and be versatile for them. He looked really good down the stretch as a rookie. They like him a lot. They brought in Denzel Perriman in a trade. They signed Jayon Brown to a really cheap deal. I'm going to miss having him in a Titans uniform. They have Darian Butler, who they picked up as an undrafted free agent this year, and they really like him. They also have Luke Masterson, who's an undrafted free agent this year, Curtis Bolton, and Tate Davis, which they cut a lot of. Well, they basically transformed their entire linebacking core except for Diablo from last year. Like, there is no one left standing from the roster last year. But, which is not a bad thing either. They cut a lot of big contracts and are replacing them with cheaper means. Hopefully for them that translates to better linebacker play. Moving to the secondary, Trayvon Mullen has been really good the last couple seasons. Like, he's really shown improvement in years 2 and 3. Hopefully they get more out of Rock Ya-Sin than Indianapolis did. Otherwise, you're not going to love him as your second corner. Nate Hobbs is a good slot corner. That was they nailed. That's one draft pick last year that actually Mayock and the gang did a pretty good job drafting last year. Nate Hobbs in the 5th round, turning into a starting nickelback, not bad. They also have 24th round pick Amik Robertson, who I was really high on that year. I thought he was destined to be a high-end slot corner with ball production. We'll see. It's been a little slow for him, so slower than I expected for him. They brought in Anthony Averett, former, Alabama corner with great measurables and, incredible athleticism, who isn't necessarily great at playing the position, but he's got, talents. They've also brought in Darius Phillips, Bryce Cosby, who's undrafted this year. They have Isaiah Brown, Sam Webb, who's one of my favorite undrafted players. He was another small school corner. I liked him a lot out of Missouri Western. 6 foot, 202, like really strong corner. Really physical. I think he's going to be a really nice player for them if he develops into what I believe he can be and what they're going to try to develop him into. And I really hope he makes the roster. This guy has the ability with his physicality to be the kind of guy that you need to battle the A.J. Browns, Treylon Burke type receivers that are running around right now. But he's got really strong hands and press. Moving to the safety position, which Diablo could see time there, but Traven Morig looked exactly the part of a really good starting NFL safety. I think he's gonna turn something really good. Abram has shown strides. That's your starting safety pair. They brought in Deron Harmon, who McDaniels knows from his time in New England. They've got Roger Teamer, who's more of a special teams guy, in my opinion. They brought in Matthias Farley from Tennessee. I hated to see him leave too. I think he's a really good rotational safety and special teams player. And then they picked up a couple undrafted guys, Isaiah Polomeo and Quinterio Cole. Both of whom I'd be surprised if they made the roster, honestly. The Raiders, secondary. They've still got a lot of prove it at corner, because even though Mullen has shown strides, that's really not what you want as your number one corner. You don't want Rock Ya-Sin as your number one corner either. And even though Nate Hobbs has looked really good in the slot, if the place in your secondary that you're the most confident you're good in is your slot corner, well, among the cornerback position, that's not ideal. Luckily, they have improved the safety position. And they run a lot of too high, which helps Abram out in deep coverage. So, moving to special teams, you got A.J. Cole and Daniel Carlson. Daniel Carlson's been one of the best kickers in the league. A.J. Cole is, solid punter. Trent Sieg is a fine long snapper. They like him. They've kept him around. Returning kicks. Right now, Hunter Renfrow is their starting punt returner. They've got Amir Abdullah as their starting kick returner, which means he probably is going to be their fourth running back. They've also got Keelan Cole, Darius Phillips, and DJ Turner listed here. See, Micah Kaiser would have probably factored into the linebacker group as the third linebacker if he wasn't out injured right now. Jordan Jenkins, of course, as an interior kind of run-defending defensive lineman. Fackrell being on the edge would have really improved their depth. And I hate to see Sincere McCormick on IR. He didn't test as well as at the combine as I thought, because he's not the biggest running back, but he ended up not being nearly as... His long speed ended up not being nearly as good as I thought it would have been. I didn't think he was going to blaze a trail, but I was really shocked when he turned in, I think it was like a 4.61. I was like, well, he's not getting drafted now. Finally, we're going to get to the Los Angeles Chargers. And afterward, we're going to get into how I'm going to rank these teams finally. So, receiver, you've got, in my opinion, the best receiver room in the division. As a whole. Keenan Allen is awesome. Top 10 in his position, no doubt. Mike Williams was great last year. One of the best, throw it up and he's going to get it receivers, but he showed more than that last year. Palmer, I think, is going to have a big year too. He's got great hands, and I think he's going to turn into a really good high-end role-playing receiver with the ceiling of becoming a really good number two. Jalen Guyton had been their number 3 receiver. They really like him. I think he's going to continue to be a really good role-playing receiver. Michael Brady and DeAndre Carter's going to factor into the return game for them. Michael Brady, Jason Moore, Joe Reed, undrafted free agent Trevor Bradford, whoever, ends up making the roster as the 6th receiver. I just think they're top 4. I think a lot of people maybe argue the Chiefs' top 4 is better. The Raiders with Adams and Renfro, throw in whoever else you want. The Broncos, But I really do. I think the Chargers have the best, top 4. Because the Broncos, with Tim Patrick injured, that really hurts them. Because Hamler hasn't had a whole lot of consistent production yet in 2 years. I wonder what order people would rank Williams and Renfro in. I think most people would put Williams ahead of all of the Broncos receivers right now. I think people would put Mike Williams above every receiver on the Chiefs right now. And he's their number 2 receiver. So that's my feeling there. I think they're great at the receiver position. And they should be much better on the offensive line here. One, Rashawn Slater's going into year 2. He looked great as a rookie. They've got their left tackle. They're hoping Matt Feller's going to improve the guard position. Corey Linsley, if he stays healthy, he's one of the 5 best centers in the league for sure. I think Zion Johnson's going to hit the ground running. He was my top-rated interior lineman. I am a huge fan of his. He's got a lot of upside. Former third-round pick Trey Pipkins is currently listed over Storm Norton as the starting right tackle. I think Chargers fans really wanted to see a new name at right tackle than one of those guys this year, but I believe between one of them, I do think, which I liked Pipkins back in 2019, but I thought he was going to be a project. It's year 4. If he doesn't work out, the project's failed. Storm Norton, this is year 3 for him. I'd say if you're not confident he's a guy who can start for you, experiment's over. You need to do something else next year. On the interior, behind Feller, Johnson, and Linsley, I guess I should also say they have Zach Bailey at tackle, but whatever. And Foster Serrell is listed as their backup left tackle. But if either of those guys end up seeing the field, this is going to be a disaster. On the interior line, backing up, Jamari Sawyer, they got in the 6th round. I thought that was a great value. Sawyer was awesome at Georgia. He played tackle at Georgia. And he just seemed like a guy who you slide into guard, and I'm like, I think this guy could be a starter as a rookie potentially. He could be one of those guys. At the very least, I think he's going to turn into it like a quality starting guard. Or he has the ability to turn into not only a quality starting guard, but a great starting guard. So hopefully that bodes well, and maybe he can take that starting job from Matt Feller eventually. They also have Will Clapp, who they brought in to be backup at center. And they have last year's 5th round pick Brendan James still at guard, as well as Ryan Hunter. I'm still, like I said, I'm not in love with Feller, and right tackle's really got to prove it. Like, Chargers fans are, I know a lot of my friends are like concerned about the decision, and my 2 buddies who are Chargers fans really wanted to see an upgraded right tackle this offseason. So we'll see. I know they definitely didn't want to see Storm Norton back at starter. Moving to tight end, they brought in Gerald Everett. think that was a good move. Donald Parham is back, and he's 6'8" and athletic and has all the upside in the world. Man, I hope he doesn't, he's able to play this year and not get, another devastating concussion like what happened. That was such a freak concussion and, severe injury. But that guy has so much potential. They also have last year's third-round pick, Trey McKitty, who I kind of liked as a project last year, just not in the third round. They also have Hunter Campenmeyer. They also have Eric Cromenhoek and Sage Surratt. Sage Surratt is listed as a tight end here, which kind of makes sense considering how slow he was. You want to talk about a guy, Sage Surratt, 40 time killed his value. Well, and sitting out a season he shouldn't have. Moving to quarterback, Justin Herbert. I'm in it on the Justin Herbert MVP train. The Chase Daniel retirement fund is still going strong. That guy just keeps hanging around as a veteran backup. Easton Stick still here as well on the last year of his rookie deal. It's really interesting though. Sometimes when you see teams their backup quarterbacks, I'm like, why is their backup not more like their starter? Not that there are just a ton of Justin Herberts going around, but there are a lot of physically talented quarterbacks who haven't necessarily worked out. But I guess you'd rather have a brain as your backup quarterback than the brainless. So, running back Austin Eckler starting, they're really good there at starter because Eckler can do it all. I love taking Isaiah Spiller in the fourth round, giving yourself kind of a chunky power back who has hands, who can pass protect. He can play in all three phases, but he gives you something better than you've really had, in my opinion, at your running back 2 for several years now, because he should be an upgrade over Joshua Kelly. And I'll say this, I like Larry Roundtree last year, but I like Spiller better than Roundtree. And then they also have undrafted free agents Kevin Marks and Letty Brown. But I'm going to say they're going to carry 4 running backs, and it's going to be Eckler, Spiller, Kelly, and Roundtree. And then at fullback, they drafted Xander Horvath in the 7th round. And they still have Gabe Neighbors here. I'm going to assume, though, that Horvath makes the roster and Neighbors is either somewhere else or on the practice squad. Moving to the defensive line, you want to talk about a team that really decided we're going all in on improving a weakness. Now, some of the fan base might have really wanted that right tackle, but when you look at what they've done with their front 7, I'd be excited. Carolina decided to cut Morgan Fox. He's really good. They got him on the cheap. They got Sebastian Joseph Day, slightly cheaper than, say, the Broncos got DJ Jones, and I think Sebastian Joseph Day is just as good. And is coming off helping the Rams win a Super Bowl. They brought in Austin Johnson on, a 2-year, $14 million contract. They still have Jerry Tillery, who going into year 4 still hasn't lived up to being a first-round pick. I'm not shocked. They have Otto Ogbonnia, who they drafted in the 5th round. They have Christian Covington here, who's a solid rotational guy. Joe Graziano, Andrew Brown, Braden Fehoko, and Carlo Kemp. But they've signed a whole new starting defensive line this offseason in Fox, Joseph Day, and Johnson. and being able to move Tillery and Covington into rotational roles, drafting Otito Ogbonnia in the 5th round into a rotational role. I really, really like how much they improved their defensive line, and particularly their really bad run defense. Then, you've got Joey Bosa. Let's go out and trade for Khalil Mack and get him for 2nd and 6th round picks. Then, let's sign Kyle Van Noy, who was a cap casualty for the 2nd year in a row. This time, New England. And then you still have 4th round pick from last year, Chris Rumpf, who I really like. You have Eneke Egbule and Jamal Davis as well behind them as kind of, young, potential depth pieces. Egbule's in his 2nd year in the system. Brandon Staley. I wanted to say, I'm like, Stokely, that was the receiver. No, Brandon Staley. And they like Egbule. Otherwise, 6th round pick from 2019. If they didn't like him, he wouldn't be on the roster going into year 4. So, but your top 3 is Bosa, Mack, and Van Noy. And Van Noy can play some off-ball backer too. You've also got Chris Rumpf in here. Man, if I'm a Chargers fan, I'm loving my front 5 because 3-4 base. But then you look at the interior line. Drew Tranquil was a really good pick in the 4th round 2019. He's worked out. Kenneth Murray looked better in year 2. We'll see if he makes big strides in year 3 because they need him to. They still have Nick Neiman, who they drafted in the 6th round last year. They picked up Troy Reeder from the Raiders. I mean, not the Raiders, from the Rams. I saw LAR and for some reason thought LA Raiders. They've got Amen Ogbong Beniga. Bamiga. I was reading that M as an N. So, Ogbong Bamiga. Cole Christensen, and they also picked up undrafted free agent Tyreek Maddox Williams. You don't necessarily love the depth at interior linebacker, but Tranquil's solid. I liked Neiman as a late round flyer pick last year. Reeder's a fine depth piece. If Murray can become close to what the front office believes, or what they imagine him turning into, they should be good at linebacker. Like, Murray's got a lot of talent. And with Tranquil there to be more the smart one, Murray gets to be more the run and hit guy. Then you've got the secondary. J.C. Jackson's going to miss a little bit of time, but he should be back early in the season. Asante Samuel Jr. was really good as a rookie last year. Not a shock to me. They've got Bryce Callahan to play slot corner, which he's really good at that. They just signed Derwin James to a big extension at safety. They've got Nasir Adderley as well there. And then they spent a 3rd-round pick on J.T. Woods. That was a high upside move. This is like, Woods is tall, long, and fast, but he's more of a rangy free safety type or attack downhill type. He's really not like a sideline to sideline. Like, I don't know if you'd want to play him at strong safety. I really think he's a more of a rangy free safety type. is his best role, especially early on. They also have 6th-round pick from last year, Aloy Gilman. They have Raheem Lane, who went undrafted this year, and 7th-round pick Mark Webb Jr. from last year, along with Ben DeLuca, who went undrafted last year. Oh, I didn't even talk about the backup corners. I'm sorry. I talked about the starters. Backup corners, Michael Davis has been really good for them for a long time. Him moving to like your 4th corner is really good. They drafted Dean Leonard in the 7th round, Jasir Taylor in the 6th round. They picked up Brandon Sebastian, undrafted. They have, and they also have Kamon Hall and Michael Jacquet at corner. Staley was, and I'll say this about the corner stuff. These 7th, 6th round guys at corner. Staley and the Rams coaching staff in recent years has had great success developing undrafted and or late round corners. Well, just defensive back generals, but corners. I wouldn't be shocked to see that continue here. And I mean, this team also, like, look at Michael Davis. They've also done it before too. So, really like their secondary. And their starting secondary, I think, is as good as any teams in the leagues. Moving to special teams. This has always been an adventure for the Chargers. I like bringing in J.K. Scott. He hasn't been as good in the NFL as he was at Bama. But I still believe in him. Dustin Hopkins, they brought in a kicker last year. He's still here. They've got Josh Harris at long snapper, Harris a really good long snapper. And right now, like I expected, DeAndre Carter, he is the only listed return guy. Here's the crazy thing, though, because this is always with the Chargers, all the people on the freaking injured list. Ty Shelby, injured reserve. Andrew Trainer, injured reserve. Forrest Merrill, injured reserve. Stone Smart, non-football injury list. Isaac Weaver, injured reserve. Tavon Campbell, injured reserve. And Damon Lloyd, injured reserve. The Chargers have got to not be like the most injured team in the league. Or one of them. It's like they always are. I don't know what it is. I don't know if they have or how many times they've overturned their medical staff. It is ridiculous. Just their injuries. So, with that being said, those are the rosters, position groups, teams, kind of how I feel about different position groups. This is tough. My gut tells me the Chiefs, but I'm picking the Chargers. Partially because I want to pick the Chargers, but I do believe outside of offensive line and tight end, I think the Chargers are as good or better at every position group than the Chiefs. Like I said, I give a slight edge to them at receiver. Well, I say a slight. I give them the edge at receiver. I give them the edge at running back. I think right now, quarterback's close enough to call it a wash. Their offensive line isn't as good as the Chiefs, but it's not that far off. Tight end, I mean, the Chiefs have Travis Kelce. But defensively speaking, they've got a better edge group. Their interior group, while they don't have a Chris Jones, I'd say is is deeper. I don't think they're quite as good at linebacker at the top, but I like their depth better. And I would take their secondary, just in general, over the Chiefs. Now, the Chiefs have the edge in coaching staff. I think it's going to be really close. I think the Chargers are going to edge out the Chiefs for the top of the division. Behind the Chiefs, that one's tough, but looking at the rosters, I just believe in the Raiders a little bit more than the Broncos. I didn't think I was going to come into this saying that, but the Raiders are more proven at receiver, I would say, at this point. They have the edge at tight end. I don't think the Broncos have that big an edge over them on offensive line. I like the Broncos running back room a little bit better than the Raiders. But I actually think the quarterback, I think it's a wash at quarterback, what we've seen the past couple of years. And then defensively, I would take the Raiders defense slightly. Well, I would take the Raiders front seven over the Broncos. And the Broncos definitely have a slight edge in the secondary over the Raiders because of Simmons and Surtain. But I like the Raiders' depth better. Well, I like their safety depth better. That one's close. That's what I mean. It's really close in this division between like the top two teams and then the bottom two teams. And I still think all these teams are very much playoff contenders. Like, I think the Broncos and Raiders are both very much playoff contenders. And it wouldn't shock me. I think if you were going to pick which division the MVP was most likely to come out of, if that's how you were going to do it, or your MVP pick, like if you could bet like which NFL division, the AFC West is a pretty good one because I see the path for every quarterback in this division winning MVP. And they all have the weapons and firepower to do it. And then for Mahomes, he has the argument of like, yeah, like I've got good weapons, but I mean, compared to the rest of these guys, yeah, I've got Travis Kelce, but like, look at what I just did, resurrecting Juju, getting maybe the best, or getting the best we've gotten out of Mecole Hardman, potentially, sending Marquez Valdez-Scantling maybe to the best season of his career, and what I think out of all these other than resurrecting Juju, I think is going to happen, Sky Moore being extremely productive as a rookie receiver and maybe outproducing some of the receivers drafted ahead of him. Mahomes could have like a really, and losing Tyreek Hill, like there's narrative stuff that could help him there. Although, I don't necessarily love narratives affecting MVP and other awards conversations because, I'm sorry, like, it's supposed to be about what you do on the field. But some narratives are compelling and are worth taking into account. This one might be, if we're having to, split hairs later in the season. So with that being said, we will wrap up the AFC tomorrow. I'm planning on streaming tomorrow. I'm streaming a little early. I've got to be at band practice at like 5 o'clock. So I'll put an Instagram post out earlier tomorrow than I did today about when I'll be streaming if I stream tomorrow. Because if I stream tomorrow, I'm finishing the AFC tomorrow. If not, I'll finish it Friday. But we'll see. With that being said, that has been Blind Eye Live. If you can give me any pointers, again, if you check out the replay or whatever, drop something in the comments. Help me out. If I'm droning or low energy or whatever, or you've got suggestions for maybe how to spice up the show, leave them. I'm all ears. I'm definitely not going to be one of those people who's like, I've got everything figured out and I know what I'm doing all the time. So, anything that can help make the show better for you helps me out. So, hope you all have a great rest of your